Jamal Carter adjusted the weight of the delivery boxes in his arms and pushed open the heavy glass doors of Westbridge Enterprises, one of the most prestigious investment firms in the city. The moment he stepped inside, the air seemed to shift. The polished marble floors, the sleek modern furniture, and the sharp-dressed professionals moving about spoke of wealth and exclusivity. But Jamal wasn't distracted by any of it. He had been in places like this before. As he walked through the lobby toward the reception desk, he felt the eyes on him. A group of young executives lounging near the espresso machine paused their conversation and turned their gaze to him. "Who let him in?" one of them muttered, just loud enough for him to hear. "I didn't know they delivered to this floor," another whispered with a chuckle. Jamal heard it all. He always did, but he didn't react. His face remained calm, his steps steady. Then Bradley Weston, a tall man in an expensive suit, smirked and leaned toward his colleagues. "Did you take a wrong turn, man? This isn't the back entrance." Laughter rippled through the group. Some looked away, pretending to be busy, but their amusement was obvious. Jamal didn't flinch. He simply nodded, his eyes holding a glimmer of something unreadable, and kept walking. If only they knew who he really was. Their laughter wouldn't last for long. Before you judge someone by their job or appearance, take a moment to hear their story. Stay with us until the end. You won't believe the moment that wiped the smirks off their faces. Westbridge Enterprises sat in the heart of New York City, a towering symbol of power and prestige. Inside, the office buzzed with energy. Ambitious executives in tailored suits strode across the sleek marble floors, their expensive watches glinting under the bright overhead lights. Conversations were fast, sharp, and competitive. Deals were being made over overpriced lattes, and emails were fired off with ruthless efficiency. Here, status wasn't just important, it was everything. Jamal Carter, in his simple brown delivery uniform, stood in stark contrast to the employees around him. Where they moved with arrogance, he walked with quiet confidence. Where they spoke with authority, he remained silent. The air was thick with the scent of expensive coffee, cologne, and quiet judgment. Sleek glass walls reflected success, but they also reflected the unspoken reality of places like this. Respect here was given based on wealth, not character, and that was about to change. Jamal walked through the corridor, carefully balancing the packages in his hands. The whispers followed him. "Man, can you imagine doing that for a living?" One executive scoffed. "Bet he wishes he could be in our shoes," another muttered, smirking as he adjusted his designer tie. Bradley, leading the group, exaggerated Jamal's movements, as if mocking the way he carried the boxes. The others chuckled, enjoying the joke at his expense. Their laughter was sharp, dismissive, assuming they were better, smarter, more important. Jamal smirked subtly, but said nothing. He had no reason to defend himself. Just as he reached the exit, a voice cut through the noise. "The new investor has arrived!" The CEO's assistant rushed in, breathless, scanning the room. Immediately the executives straightened their ties and fixed their postures, suddenly eager to impress. Jamal stopped walking. Slowly, he turned, not toward the exit, but toward the conference room. His steps were calm, deliberate. The executives stared, confused. Then their confusion turned to shock as the assistant walked straight up to Jamal and greeted him with deep respect. "Mr. Carter, the board is ready for you." Silence. The air shifted instantly. The same man they had mocked, the delivery man they had laughed at, was the person they were all waiting to impress. The room was dead silent. The weight of realization settled on the group of executives like a crushing force. The same delivery man they had mocked, the man they had laughed at moments ago, was now standing at the center of their world. Bradley's smirk had vanished. His face, once so full of amusement, was now frozen in an expression of disbelief. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Jamal Carter, the new multimillionaire investor, walked forward with an easy, confident stride. He wasn't rushing, wasn't gloating. He simply moved with purpose, as if he belonged here. Because he did. The executives who had been so eager to belittle him now stared in stunned silence. Jamal's previous silence now made perfect sense. He hadn't responded to their insults because he didn't need to. As he passed Bradley, their eyes met. Bradley's face flushed, as if searching for some way to fix what had just happened. But Jamal's gaze held something amused, something sharp. There was no anger, no outburst. Just the quiet power of a man who had already won. Jamal hadn't always been a millionaire. Far from it. He had grown up in one of the toughest neighborhoods in Brooklyn. His mother worked 2 jobs, his father had been absent, and opportunities were scarce. But Jamal was different. He had drive. Even as a kid, he worked twice as hard as everyone else. He excelled in school, not because it was easy, but because he knew education was his way out. He spent hours at the library, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. By the time he was a teenager, he was already thinking like an entrepreneur. He started small, running errands for neighbors, fixing broken electronics, anything that could earn him money. Then came the real opportunity. At 19, he noticed a problem. Small businesses in his community struggled with deliveries. The big courier services were expensive and unreliable, and local stores couldn't keep up with the growing demand. So Jamal started his own logistics company with nothing but an old van and a relentless work ethic. At first, it was just him, waking up before dawn, delivering packages, handling customer complaints, and running the books. He worked like a machine, and it paid off. His company grew fast. He hired employees, expanded his services, and eventually built one of the most successful, tech-driven logistics firms in the country. Now, he was worth millions. But he never forgot where he came from. While others flaunted their wealth, Jamal preferred humility. He had learned early that respect wasn't about money, it was about character. And that was a lesson these executives had clearly never learned. Jamal entered the boardroom, where the CEO of Westbridge Enterprises, Mr. Holloway, was waiting with a warm smile. "Mr. Carter, welcome. It's an honor to have you here." The same executives who had mocked him were now seated stiffly at the table, eyes wide, faces pale. Jamal placed his hands on the table, scanning the room. His gaze landed on Bradley and his friends, making sure they knew he remembered everything. Then he smiled. "Before we start," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I'd like to address something first." The air grew heavier. Bradley swallowed hard. Everyone braced themselves. They had made a mistake. And now they were about to learn just how big of a mistake it was. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating. The executives, who had been so full of arrogance just minutes ago, now sat rigid and uneasy, shifting in their seats. Jamal rested his hands on the table, his expression calm but unreadable. He let the moment stretch, watching the growing discomfort in their faces. Finally, he spoke. His voice was even, but each word carried weight. "Before we begin this meeting, I want to talk about something that happened just moments ago." No one dared to look at him directly. Bradley clenched his jaw, staring at his lap. "When I walked into this building, I wasn't greeted with respect. I wasn't acknowledged as a professional, as an equal. I was mocked, laughed at, judged because of my uniform." A few of the executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their hands gripping the edges of the table. Why? Because I was carrying a package? Because I wasn't dressed like you? Because you assumed that someone delivering something must be beneath you? He let the question hang in the air. Bradley opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no excuse that could fix this, Jamal continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. I started from nothing. I worked twice as hard to get where I am today. But let me be clear, hard work isn't limited to boardrooms. The people who deliver your food, clean your offices, drive your taxis, they work just as hard, sometimes harder. They deserve the same respect you give to someone in a $1,000 suit. A heavy silence followed his words. The truth stung. Then Jamal's tone changed, calm but laced with something even sharper. Here's the thing, you weren't just laughing at me. You were laughing at the very values that built this company. You were laughing at integrity, at humility, at respect. And now I have to ask myself a serious question. He leaned forward slightly, his next words sending a chill through the room. Do I really want to invest in a company led by people who think like that? Gasps echoed around the table. The executives' eyes widened in panic. The deal, the investment they had been waiting for, was now at risk. Bradley, his face pale, finally found his voice. Mr. Carter, he stammered, scrambling for damage control. We didn't mean... It was just a misunderstanding. Jamal tilted his head slightly, unimpressed. A misunderstanding? He repeated, his voice carrying a quiet power. Tell me, if I hadn't been this investor, if I had just been a regular delivery man, would you have ever reflected on this? Or would you have gone home, laughed about it, and moved on? Bradley had no answer. Sweat beaded on the brows of some of the executives. Others cast nervous glances at the CEO, who looked deeply embarrassed by his employees. Bradley tried again. I truly apologize, Mr. Carter. It was wrong, and I... Jamal held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. I don't need your apologies. Bradley froze. Jamal's voice was calm, steady, but undeniably firm. I don't need words spoken out of fear. I need you to reflect on who you truly are. The weight of his words settled heavily on them all. The laughter they had shared earlier was long gone. Their arrogance had vanished, and in its place was only shame. A heavy silence hung over the boardroom like a dark cloud. The weight of Jamal's words had sunk in, leaving the executives visibly shaken. The CEO, Mr. Holloway, cleared his throat, his face pale with embarrassment. He straightened his tie, glancing at Jamal with an apologetic expression. Mr. Carter, he said carefully, I want to assure you that Westbridge Enterprises does not tolerate discrimination in any form. This behavior is not reflective of our company's values. Jamal didn't react right away. He simply watched the CEO as if measuring his sincerity. Then his voice was calm but firm. Actions speak louder than words, Mr. Holloway. It's easy to make statements like that, but what matters is what happens when no one is watching, when there's no investor in the room, when it's just a regular person trying to do their job. His words struck deep. Some employees looked guilty, their heads lowering. Others seemed to be panicking, realizing just how badly they had messed up, not just morally, but professionally. Bradley's hands were clenched into fists, his face still pale. The man who had been the loudest just minutes ago was now completely silent. Jamal picked up his briefcase and turned toward the door. But before leaving, he paused. Slowly, he turned back to Bradley and his group, his expression unreadable. Respect isn't about job titles, he said, his voice steady but filled with meaning. If I were just a delivery man, would I deserve less? No one dared to answer. The room remained silent. For the first time, the arrogant executives who had mocked him had nothing to say. Jamal let the silence linger a moment longer, then turned to face the CEO. "Here's my decision," he said, his voice firm but measured. "I will go forward with my investment." A visible wave of relief rushed through the room. "Is but only under one condition." The tension returned instantly. Jamal continued, his eyes sharp and unwavering. "This company must enforce strict policies against workplace discrimination and train its employees on respect and inclusion. I don't just want empty words, I want to see real change." The CEO, eager to save the deal, nodded quickly. "Absolutely, Mr. Carter. You have my word. We'll take immediate action." Jamal held his gaze for a moment, then gave a small nod. With that, he picked up his briefcase and turned toward the exit. His posture was straight, his head held high. As he walked through the office, the same employees who had laughed at him now stood frozen in humbled silence. No more snide remarks, no more arrogant smirks, just quiet shame. Bradley, once so full of confidence, lowered his eyes as Jamal passed by. He had learned his lesson. And Jamal knew he had just taught them one they would never forget. The very people who mocked Jamal ended up at his mercy, forced to confront their own biases and prejudices. Their arrogance cost them their pride, and Jamal's quiet strength turned the tables without him ever needing to raise his voice. Instead of reacting with anger, Jamal used wisdom, composure, and power to make a real impact. He understood that true strength comes from patience and the ability to teach a lesson through actions rather than words alone. The story reinforces that no job is inferior and that success isn't determined by what you wear, but by your dedication, perseverance, and integrity. Jamal's journey from a struggling young man to a multimillionaire investor highlights how humble beginnings don't define a person's worth. People should be judged by their character, not by their job title or appearance. The executives assumed superiority based on wealth and status, but Jamal's actions proved that true respect is earned through dignity, not arrogance. Through this powerful story, the lesson is clear. Never underestimate someone based on their appearance, because you might just end up answering to them.